Imagine if YouTube was hacked. Like how many people in the world would be screaming at Google? You're like, what's happened to YouTube? Yeah.
So it's like just watching a bit of like YouTube videos for fun. It's not so different than cacao.
Not so different.
Than reading cacao in its impact, because those servers need this like huge.
Yeah. Yeah. So watching it for education is obviously a much more higher ideal, isn't it? Watching a video for education. Watching a video for fun is not a low ideal, because you do need to have relaxation and other things like that. God's happy for you to have relaxation. You just got to bear in mind the ethical impact of what you're doing every time you do it. So if most people don't understand when it comes to the internet, how much of the world's resources are being used to satisfy the internet. Yeah, huge amount of the world's resources. This is why a peer-to-peer arrangement is better than a server arrangement generally. More loving anyway. A peer-to-peer arrangement is where all of you share bits and pieces of the data, rather than all the data coming from one place. So, like if 10,000 people connect to the internet and all of you have got a little bit of the data, then you can all combine that data so that the total video is still being played, but it's all actually stored on 10,000 different machines coming from 10,000 different sources, rather than from one source. When you do things from one source, it just makes things much harder to share. So the principle that Mary and I follow with the sharing of divine truth is you're all allowed to take recordings whenever you want. And the principle of that is if you all individually share those recordings to different people, then there's not a single thing that's being, not a single source of information that's being hammered all of the time, because you're all sharing at different times, right? So there's a sharing of the load. Yeah. It's always good to share the load. It's the same with building anything, isn't it? Like, I think you guys said that 13 people came and helped, or 11 people came and helped you build the yurt. A lot easier to get it done if 11 people were helping than just you and Mandy doing it, right? Yeah, so, obviously sharing to do things is much better than doing them by yourselves. The key is whether when you're sharing, whether it's loving or not. To keep things loving, it means that you got to have someone who's responsible keeping the level of love. Yeah, and this is what we notice a lot with sharing, is that the level of love goes down to the common denominator, which is not the level of love you necessarily would want. Yeah. Anyway, we were just having a discussion with Tim earlier while you guys were waiting for you guys about sharing and videoing and these kind of things. All right, now a few more things I wanted to say in answer to your question. So remember we said that you will have to make these transitions through the spheres, right? And that faith is the quality that also temporarily raises your condition to imagine a new place before you're there. The interesting thing is that once you get to that position, so let's say you get to the third sphere of the spirit world in terms of your development, you know far more about all of those places down from where you are than the people in those places know about those places. So this is very interesting thing that happens, is that as you progress, the more you become aware of everything that's happening below your condition. And on top of that, the more you're able to help anybody who is below your own condition. However, anybody that is above your condition, or for a start, helping them is impossible, because they already know more than you do, right? So helping them is impossible. The only way you can really help them is by physically assisting them. So if they come to your sphere and say, how would you like to do this job? Most people go, yep, I'm in for that, because in the process, You're going to learn things from the person. You're going to learn new things that you don't know about. There's things you'll gain faith of if you do that. But you can't really tell them how to do it because they already know more about love than you know. And so they already know more about how to do it than you know. So you might think, I'll do it this way. And they go, no, not in harmony with love to do it that way, right? So there are times when you, as an individual, when you reach a certain sphere in terms of your development, you will be helping the people below. And so that means visiting them. Obviously, that means going to their location and talking to them, and going to their location and talking to them. So that is all going to occur naturally, obviously. But when it comes to helping those above, the only way you can really help is by doing what they say. In other words, being obedient to what they ask. So you offer your help. They're not going to get you to help them if you didn't want to. But if you offer your help, make sure you do what they say, rather than doing it your own way. Because doing it your own way, they already know a better way because they're in a more highly developed state of love. So there's aspects of progress that do mean that you will go back to other spheres, but not necessarily for your own learning. Now, there is one exception to that. If you have progressed to the fifth or sixth sphere in the intellectual manner, so the manner that you were describing about, working out what next thing you need to do is and making sure you do it, if you progress that way, you can actually reach the sphere of the perfect natural man, the perfect human, which is the sixth sphere, progressing in that method, right? But to get to the seventh sphere, you can't use the same method. Now, there are learnings that occur in the third and the fifth sphere that help you make the transition between the sixth and the seventh sphere. And for a perfect spirit who's not yet found God's way, not yet got God's standard of love and not yet receiving God's standard of love, they will have to go and visit those places to learn what they missed out on. That make sense? So they'll have to go to the third and probably to the fifth. The third, they'll have to learn about how to emotionally connect to the feelings of love rather than actually expressing love through principle. So what I mean by that is that love can be expressed as a principle. In other words, if you think about it, there's a Greek word for it that best describes it called agape. And what that word means is that you love somebody based on the principle that you're doing the right thing for the person. An example of that is, I don't really feel for you, but I do the right thing with you because it's just the right thing to do. So that's love based on principle. Now, a perfect human has had to base most of his love on principle. But how much of it is emotional for him will depend on what he learnt in the third and the fifth spheres. An emotional feeling is love is, I like you as my brother. You're my friend, my brother. I want to help you as my brother, my sister. Does that make sense? Which is very different than me just wanting to help you because it's the right thing to do. Right? So a perfect human often has developed themselves to the perfect human because it's the right thing to do, but they haven't felt like, I want to help because you're my brother, you're my friend. I want to assist because of that, but because I have an emotional investment in you as a person. And those emotions are usually developed in the third and the fifth sphere of the spirit world, or the equivalent of those places on earth, yeah. Okay. Just before we finish off tonight, tomorrow, how many of you would be against us starting earlier, just so that we can avoid the afternoon heat tomorrow, because I think it's going to be hotter? Or are you all pretty set that you want to start at 11?
Be more definite in your question.
Can we start at 9 or 10?
Yes.
Yes. What time would suit?
9 is fine.
10.
Put up your hand, 10. Put up your hand, 9. So it's even. What do we do?
9:30.
Compromise.
Compromise. Is that what you do?
What is best for you?
Oh, thank you. That's a very loving question. Given the fact that I'm the one talking for the most, right? Yeah. My feeling is probably 9:30. If that's that'd be good for me. Just at 9:30 gives us time to do the things we do in the morning, try to get a walk and stuff like that. And also, so then we might finish about 2:30, so we can avoid this sort of tomorrow's going to be hotter than today, so if we can avoid this afternoon heat a bit, that'd be good. All right, now, any other questions about discussed there?
I just have a lot of questions about the spirit world. So I don't know, it's not, but it's just like, I got the impression that in the spheres, like based on your soul condition, you were with that group of people.
Yep.
But
And
so,
attractions, things you're passionate about.
right, so but you can still, so if you're in a higher sphere, you can choose to go down and visit, but if you're in a lower sphere, you can't go up. And it's not everybody's mixed together, like in this world where everybody's together.
That's right, it's not like that.
So just I'm thinking about my family.
Yes.
My
yes.
mother. Just when you pass, if people are in different conditions, so you might not be with your family.
Correct.
Yeah.
And many aren't.
Many aren't.
Many aren't, yeah. Most aren't.
Right.
Yeah. Because you think let's say your mum passes, she might pass 30 years before you do. In that 30 years, she's learnt some things, she's progressed in love, she's grown to a new place. She'll come and visit you, most probably. If she loves you, she will come and visit you for sure. But you can't go where she is because you're not yet developed in love like she's been. But it's because she's 30 years ahead of you, like in the spirit world. So, and she can help you to teach you about what she's learnt. But obviously, if she hasn't learnt much, then she's not going to be able to teach you much either.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, so you said that when people pass, then they learn about the spheres. They know. So every person that passes and goes into the spirit world knows this information.
Not in the first sphere. You have to ask. Like everything in the spirit world, you have to ask. But usually, by the time most spirits get to the second sphere, they're aware that there is a lot more spheres than 2.
Yeah, and also it's not guaranteed that a person will seek to progress when they pass. Like that,
unlikely, actually.
Yeah, the process that Jesus was describing to Ed and Ellie with even just the intellectual progress, most spirits aren't engaging that. Because they haven't got developed ideas about the fact that progression is possible after you pass, and sometimes they think
false beliefs.
Yeah, sometimes they still want their emotional and physical addictions that they've had on Earth, they want to maintain.
They still want it on Earth.
Relationships with the people on Earth. So a lot of times people sit and stay where they are, or try to return to Earth and become earthbound.
Yeah.
We might talk about that more tomorrow afternoon, and depending on how Mary and I feel, we might actually do some channeling either tomorrow afternoon or Sunday morning. If those of you are interested, yeah. So we what we like to do, Mary and I, is share with you the principles of everything first, and then you get. It's interesting also talking to some spirits about their experience. Like in Austria, we had a chance to probably spend an hour or so just talking to some relatives of the audience as well. Just about their experience and so forth, as well as some other spirits who weren't related to the audience. So a lot of times we like to have that discussion because here there's more, we've got millions of spirits with us at the moment, and obviously they are listening. There's a lot more of them listening than there are you here. So we like to involve them in our presentations where possible. So we'll try to do that probably more like tomorrow afternoon, or when I say afternoon, if we start at 9:30, it's now going to be like
midday
or something like that. and then
Or Sunday morning,
and maybe
depending
Sunday
on-
morning.
yeah.
If we find it gets too hot in the afternoon tomorrow, we might finish off at lunchtime, and then have the morning the next day or something like that. Yep.
Yeah.
And do a bit of focus on talking to both some spirit friends, but also helping some spirits. In some places we manage to help groups of spirits to progress, but also sometimes help family members progress as well. Yeah. Yep. Microphones, guys. So yep, up there. Yep.
Just
keep
leave your hand up
'cause-
because, yeah.
Yep. Microphone.
What is the connection between the spirit role in this world regarding the personal development, as you call God's standard of love?
What do you mean? The relationship between spirits and you mean?
No, the worlds.
Yeah, worlds, yeah, yep, the spheres.
From God's perspective, they're seamless. So God created all of us with the ability to develop our spirit body senses while we're living on earth. So God actually created all of us with the ability to see, using our spirit body's eyes, to see spirits and talk to them. All of us have that ability. There's no one single person is being prevented from that ability. The problem is the majority of people on earth don't have that ability because of their emotional or soul-based condition. So they have no faith in it, they have no awareness, and also they don't have any desire for the most part. Most people on earth are very, like the earth is their sole focus.
Earthy.
Yeah, earthly,
yeah.
sole focus.
Of the earth.
So they're very focused on earth alone, and they're very focused on using the senses of their physical body rather than developing the senses of their spirit body. So God created it to be like a seamless connection so that you could actually, before you pass, be educated about where you're going to go, where your home's going to be. And you actually see it. You actually, so there'd be no fear in death in the end. That's how God created it to be. But because of the human condition being quite sinful and out of harmony with love, most humans are completely detuned to all of that now. And so that makes it then more like, it feels like a very strong separation between the earth and the spirit world, rather than it being all part of the same universe, which is how God intended it to be. Make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. And as a result of there being this separation, most of us become quite afraid of what we don't know or don't understand. And so there is on earth, there's a lot of fear about what happens when you die, what is going to happen to me after I die.
People who have died.
People who have died coming back and being afraid as well about that. So there's a lot of fear that sort of boils up in humanity on earth, to the point where hardly anybody even wants to know what happens when they die.
And then about
Microphone up.
then about let's say the time of the passing. If, for example, a group of family, they pass very close one to another, is that mean in a way that they are together in the different realms?
Not necessarily.
Not usually. Everybody's passing experience is individual, and the only thing that draws family members together are emotional injuries or passions that are the same. So on one hand, there can be passions that are the same, like desires that are the same, and then on the other hand, there can be injuries that are the same, that you learnt from your parents, and those things have a habit of drawing you together. But generally speaking, most people have hardly anything to do with their families, because and you can sort of understand why, right? Because on earth, a lot of people would like to have hardly anything to do with their families, but feel they should have something to do with their families. And so it's not a real love feeling that they have. And so when they pass, because it's not a real love feeling that draws them together, they're not drawn together.
Yeah, but
Microphone.
Some something that occurred to me when you talked before. If there is a death that is happened in a tragedy, then it's connect very much the
Oh, of
family
course.
members to the emotional place where they could not be.
Correct. So
And
if
then
there was a
it makes
tragedy,
a
like
difference.
like let's say a big storm came and all of her family died in that storm, then there's a high likelihood that family will stay together until they've dealt with the sudden passing, and then they might go their separate ways after that.
Yeah.
Yep. So
But you said before something about for the humans it's very hard to connect to the emotional level of the development in these spheres. So what I was saying is about in case of a tragedy, not all the family one, then it can create a situation where the family members they must face it in that
Yeah.
sense because of the pain, because of
Yeah, that's common on Earth, isn't
Yeah,
it? When
yeah.
somebody loses a child, for example, some people don't sort of
process
quote
it out.
unquote cope or process it, but some people they really connect emotionally, and it opens them up to truth in many areas of their life. They reassess their whole life. They feel more conscience pangs. That does happen when
Yeah,
tragedy
we often have
happens.
people come to seminars who just had somebody die, for example, or for these kind of reasons, because it's opened them up to the concept that maybe there is a spirit world when I thought there wasn't before.
Or they
things like
just have they just grieve a lot of things,
Yeah.
and most of us are trying to control our grief all the time. Sometimes the tragedy forces them into a feeling, forces them, but it becomes so much that they feel I can't fight their feeling anymore, and so they have a big release.
Yeah.
And in that process, they become sensitive to other things in their life that they can feel, oh, that's not right, or oh, I've been doing that wrong. Yeah.
But we'll talk about those kind of things more when we
Yeah.
interact with the spirits,
Thank you
when we
so
do
much.
that. Yeah,
Mm.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Tim?
When you were talking about faith experiences where you can visit a higher place, I felt like I'm normally lingering around in the house, and then I've had like a day where I was really open and I was really honest, and then I felt like I was visiting the second sphere, and I was
Yeah.
like, everyone around, I felt like they were so suppressed,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
yeah,
That's what it feels like when you're on Earth, when you go through that experience. Yeah, exactly like that. You will have these days where you go, clarity, like more clarity than normal, and things like that. The problem for most people is that it's not sustained.
yeah.
It sort of, you revert back to your old behaviours and your old condition of love, and so the condition, the faith-based condition is not sustained. The key is to use faith as a way of going, that's where I could be all the time, why aren't I? Like what do I need to do to obtain this better condition where I could be happier all the time? Yeah.
And like a bit of a, as you know, when I first met you, I was quite deluded with my condition,
Yep.
and now I have often a lot of trouble. Even like we talked about spirits before and feeling them.
Yeah.
I'm always like very unsure who's the spirit. Even sometimes I feel okay, that might be my guide.
Yep.
It's like, how can I develop my like the faith to have
Good question.
to know the flavor of my guide, like
And to even know what spirits you're interacting with,
Yes,
right?
yes.
Because obviously it's like having pals on Earth that you
Yeah.
spend a lot of time with. It's the same, like there's spirits around you spending a lot of time with you. Who are they? What,
Yeah.
Which one should I
which
listen
ones
to?
should I listen to? Like,
Yes.
are they ones going, yeah, go and kill that person, or they, or they ones going, no progress to this place? Who are they, and what's going on with them, and what's their motivations? Even these are all very good questions. We probably don't have the time right now
I
to
think
address the
a
question.
few people have a similar question, so it would be
So we
good
will-
to dedicate a bit of time to that one.
Yeah. Yeah. So if you can remind me tomorrow that we need to deal with that question, and then we can talk about how to identify who is around you at any point in time and what their motives and influences are upon you, and how do you address that? Like, what do you do about that?
Yeah.
If the influences are negative, what do you do about that? And if the influences are positive, what should you do about that? These are things we need to discuss. From a spirit perspective, it's really interesting. So you know how most of you sort of feel quite closed off from the spirit world in the sense of seeing the spirits and understanding who's there and those kind of things. Well, obviously when you're a spirit, it's almost the opposite to that. You see everybody here, like every spirit who's with us sees all of you. They even see all of your spirit mates, and actually a lot of them are chatting with each other while we're having a chat. Oh, we're meeting new people, and there's this all that going on as well. And that's all going on unseen to humans, but to the spirits, it's all seen. The whole lot is seen. So it's really interesting once you're a spirit, because you sort of see all these things going on that you'd never imagined were going on ever. When you were on Earth, you thought that wasn't possible or whatever. But once you become a spirit, you go, wow, and it doesn't matter whether you believe in God or not and what beliefs are. Has quite a big impression on you, because you realise there's a whole heap of things you don't know or understand that you thought were happening on Earth, but they weren't happening. There was a whole heap of other things happening on Earth that you thought weren't happening at all. You know what I mean? And now as a spirit, you can see them happening. So you're going, oh, wow, there's a lot of things I didn't know. There's a lot of things that I wasn't aware of. And the beauty of life is that God wants to share with you, even in this state, the things you're unaware of, but it does require passion and desire on your part to want that. And for many people on Earth, they're freaked out and worried about what's around them. Even if they do feel them, they're sort of worried about who they are and what's going on, that they wish to turn off these senses. And in the process of turning off the senses, you end up in a state where you don't really understand what's going on. Right? Now, for many on Earth, that is a chosen state. They don't want to know what's going on. And so what we would recommend to you is, as regards any truth, including truth about the spirit world, it's far better to know what's going on than it is to not know. Far better.
Yeah.
The more you know, the more you can deal with something in a more loving manner and a more truthful manner. The less you know, the more you'll be actually motivated by just impressions and feelings that you don't understand, whether they're yours or somebody else's. Won't understand. And we see this happening a lot, where even relationships on Earth, many relationships that are set up on Earth are setups by spirits, arranging the relationships on Earth that they want to arrange, so that the spirit themselves gets the addiction that they want out of the relationship. And we see this happening all the time, and oftentimes the people on Earth have no awareness at all, because they don't want to know that that's the reason why that's going on. So many of you have experienced that without really knowing, and some of you now, like with Emma and stuff, we've shared with her what's going on for her, and she now knows and sees it going on, like the setups that are going on. But it takes time to become aware about what's going on spiritually around you, and it requires emotional sensitivity on your part in order to do it.
And can I say, for you, Tim, you've had an experience that you felt went badly, and the temptation then is just to go, no more experiences, but actually you've got data, if you like. You've had an experience, you feel a bit ick maybe about what happened, but if
maybe
you can,
a bit of shame,
yep,
things like that.
If you can really revisit that experience and feel what was happening for you at every phase, that is going to give you a lot of valuable information. If you feel your way through it, you'll be much more sensitive to who's around you actually and who's influencing you. The question is really coming from the fact of, like, I actually don't want to revisit that because I feel icky about that. I'd just like to do better in future. And I understand the sentiment, but from my experience, you've got to revisit, deal with it, and then you have the knowledge based on your own experience, which is very powerful. Yeah.
Yep.
And with revisiting, you mean like emotionally feeling what happened and how I felt?
Yes,
Yeah.
why you made certain decisions, how you felt, what you skipped over. You know, there was feelings that you were having, or the conscience was trying to signal things to you, but you had an investment in ignoring that. So what was that about? You can be compassionate with yourself in that process, and in fact you'll need to be, and if you are, you'll gain a lot about you know, about your injuries, where they were, where they're at now, that kind of thing. Yeah.
Thank you.
No worries. Good.
And Glenn?
Just keep your hand up there. So
It's going to sound like a question my seven-year-old would ask, but
no question is silly, but go on.
can you describe God to us?
How do you want the description to come to you?
As to what it is I'm trying to connect with.
Okay. See, there's two ways I could respond to this now. There's like, I could go down the road of explaining to you what God is, who God is, you could say the technical aspects of God. You know what I mean by that? Sort of like, it's like explaining you the technical aspect of a mixer.
What it is, what it's not, what its
it is, what it's
capabilities
not.
are.
Yeah, so I can do that. Or I can explain to you God's feelings, and particularly God's feelings for you. Right? And that can help you in connecting to the potential of being able to connect to the God who has these feelings for you. So the problem with me, personally, I like both explanations myself. Like I'm as you know, I'm like an electronics engineer and so forth. And so I like the technical explanation as well as the emotional one together. And this sort of what I've found in my relationship with God, it's helped me understand so many things, not for myself, but in terms of how to explain it to somebody else. Yeah. Does that make sense? Like
My 7-year-old, when he asked me.
Yeah, that's right. Like you said when they ask. It's like any child who's actually got any connection with emotion at all eventually is going to ask, does God exist? Yeah. At some point, they're going to ask that question. And is God real? And how do you know God's real? And how do you know it's real? I can't see him. And there's going to be all these very, what most people on earth feel are sort of silly questions, but they're not. They're the most important questions you could ask in the universe. The most important questions you can ask are about God, God's nature, God's character, and God's feelings. Yeah. They are the most important questions because they will have the greatest influence on your future life and your happiness. And so to me, these questions, although for most people they seem like very basic and fundamental, they are actually the foundation of your relationship with God to a large degree. So answering those questions is extremely important for your future desire to grow, to have a relationship with this character, shall I call him, or her. Yeah, what is the nature of God from a sort of technical perspective, an intellectual perspective, but also what is the nature of God from a feeling perspective? Like, how does it feel to connect to God? How does it feel to receive information from God? All those questions should be high on our priority list. You know, in the first century, there's one thing, and I'm going to answer your question tomorrow morning, actually. But in the first century, for me, this question was my fundamental question. What you just asked, it was my fundamental question. What is the nature and personality of God? By the time I was able to ask that question, I was still quite a young person. I was 7 years old. When I was 5, I started connecting to this personality and started talking, like I was chatting away, just like, you know, having a chat with Mary or something. And I would receive answers, but I didn't really, when I was 5, didn't still have a developed intellect. I didn't really understand that I was sort of talking to God and receiving answers from God. I could feel it was an entity outside of me, but I didn't understand the significance of it until I was late, you know, a few years later, once I started to connect to God was telling me about God herself. Like she was sharing with me what she is, what her nature was, but also personality, character attributes. The primary one of which I learnt later was actually love, you know. But in that process, it was very good because it meant that I developed a friendship with God before I developed anything else with God. And so I started to see God as my personal friend, not as some far off, you know. All my family viewed God as like a far off concept, really. My father really didn't really even have the concept of God. Joseph sort of felt more that he was interested in the religion, you know. He wanted to be a Pharisee, so he, you know, did everything he could to sort of imbibe the religious faith at the time. And my mother had more of a concept of God in terms of an emotional concept, but she still didn't, it wasn't very definite either for her. And so I learnt through this friendship with God that God is my friend, like trying to help me grow, change, and experience things.
Yeah, and did you feel he was within you?
No, I knew he wasn't.
External?
Yeah, and in fact, one of the very first things God shared about me when I had the intellect to ask was that God is not internal, and none of God will ever be in you except for some of God's qualities, which he has chosen to gift and which you must choose to receive. And so he educated me in this process that I was never going to be him, ever. In my entire existence, I will never be God, ever. And I will approach more and more and understand more and more of God's nature as I receive substances, divine substances from God that God is gifting me. But that's my only potential, is to grow infinitely in that process. God is already infinite. I will never be infinite. I will grow or grow towards that, but I can never be that. So in that process, God shared with me that God was infinite in nature, and I was always going to be finite because I'm one of his creations. Yeah. And so this helped me come to terms with my own fallibility and my own limitations. It helped me be humble. Yep. And so I also could see that actually the more humble I was, the more I could receive. So that also told me a lot about what God likes. He likes his creations to be aware of what is real. So when we view ourselves as gods, we're not being real with ourselves. We're not being honest. We're not gods. If you were gods, do you think you'd have the same life you currently have? You know, no, of course not, right? If you know, let's face facts. You know, like, you know, we have a very, in comparison to God, of course, and this is something God shares with you over time, is you have a very limited existence because you are a creation. You're a creature created by God. You're just like an animal is a creature, but you're a different kind of creature because you're self-aware, which is an incredibly amazing thing in itself. But you are a creature still. You are a creation. And you will always be a creation. And this is something that is good to know, because then you don't try to be something different to that. You try to enable yourself just being a creation, learning from God all the time, learning from God. Like the way I sort of, and this is things we'll talk about tomorrow morning, the way I feel God is, God's got me like on his lap, giving me a hug, showing me how to have a happy life. I'm his child. Yeah? And you are his child too. And he wants to do the same for you. But you have to choose it. It's like there's either a child who's going to look at the person, you know, God, and not want to engage, or am I going to be a child who wants to sit on the lap of God and engage? That's the real question. And sitting on the lap of God and engaging and going through that process means you're having a relationship. Or do I just want to go, I know God exists, so what? And I find the whole "I know God exists, but so what" pretty amazing as an idea, because it's such a significant thing that God exists. And it's such a significant thing that He's your creator. And it's such a significant thing that He wants to share with you everything, the truth about everything. Everything. And why would you then go, so what? Like, wouldn't you, if you really knew what was being offered, you would go, that's the number one thing in my life, yeah? Because I know from experience that my relationship with Mary was not going to ever be happy until we both had that relationship with God. My relationship with others, all of my friends, all of my family, a lot of my family now are celestial spirits in the spirit world, but a lot of them were pretty angry with me when I was on earth. You know, that my brothers, a number of them were jealous of me. Most of my family thought I was crazy. My mother used to follow me around in the first century, telling everybody I was crazy to protect me from their rage. You know, there were many times when I was killed almost, you know, because of the rage of people I spoke to, and my family thought by following me around they'd check up on me and keep me under control. You know, like not understanding that actually the more stronger your connection with God is, the less controllable you are, and the less predictable you are as well. So, yeah, the relationship with God is a very important part of your future if you want it to be. And this is the big thing to remember. And tomorrow we'll talk more about what God feels about you and why God wants to have this relationship with you, right? And what God's feelings and nature are is a very important part of the conversation, because if you don't understand that God is not the God that religions have told you, and not the God that, you know, the atheists would have you believe, that there's none, but rather this person who's very interested in you and your life, why would you not want to have the relationship, given all of its advantages? Yeah. So it's something I think we need to talk about sort of a bit more length tomorrow. So answering that question is probably going to take a solid hour tomorrow morning. Just and in the process of getting the answer, hopefully what many of you will start to feel is actually just firstly be open to the fact that God's interested in you, and even just be open through the conscience, even if you can, as to God expressing whether He is interested in you or not, even is a very important thing to do, so that you develop some faith that God's this being who is intensely desirous of a personal relationship with you. Yeah. He doesn't, he's capable, given his infinite nature, to have a personal relationship with you, while at the same time having a personal relationship with Mary, while at the same time having a personal relationship with Emma, and while at the same time having a personal relationship with the over 40 billion people who've ever lived on this planet at the same time. God's capable of that. Not only on this planet, there's 6 others that I'm aware of that all are in a similar state, and there's 40 or 50 billion from those planets too, and he's capable of a relationship with all of those individually. So that sort of gives you some picture of how immense God is, yeah, in terms of what God's capable of. So the real thing to do eventually is to get to the stage where we start to feel God as our parent, but not like our mum and dad have been on earth. Yeah? And that requires also addressing why the word God has such a negative context for the majority of us. Because it does. You know, when we hear the word God, most people are even ashamed now to say they hear God or have a relationship with God. You know, it's very uncool to say that nowadays, to say that you actually have a connection with God or a relationship with God. even if you do have one, just shut up about it, is the general feeling. So, you know, if you really felt God, you wouldn't be ashamed of the relationship either, would you? You know, so that this is the thing, is that there's many taints or problems